So today's panel discussion is sustainable business. So Rick Crawford is our moderator. Rick runs a company called Emerger Strategies, and I've had the pleasure to first and foremost listen to a few of the panel discussions that he's had over the years with AFFTA, and recently was, I believe yesterday, at the AFFTA board meeting, he presented a challenge to the organization as a whole that we'll be looking at considerably with regards to how the entire industry can focus on sustainability with a true set of goals that we can set some benchmarks to and some key performance indicators to measure our performance as an industry as a whole. But just some real heady topics to think about that if I look back growing up as a kid, I just think of the kicked plastic as a whole. We never had kicked plastic. We never had plastic. It was just part of toys. And now it's incorporated in so much that we do. So a simple thing is just to start there. But I'm going to turn it right over to you, Rick, and thank you for what you've put together with the panel and all the efforts that you've already put forth. So take her away.
All right, thanks a lot. First off, thanks to AFFTA for letting me come and moderate another panel discussion and talk about things that are pretty near and dear to my heart. As Steve mentioned, my name is Rick Crawford. I'm president of Emerger Strategies. We're a sustainable business consultancy that works to improve the social, environmental, and economic bottom lines of our clients. The purpose of today's panel is really to talk about how businesses are already beginning to start to use their business to fight climate change, which is the single greatest threat to our fisheries today. But before I introduce the panel and get into that, I want to provide a little bit of context for what is sustainable business and what do I mean by improving social, environmental, and economic bottom lines. So I thought I'd provide a few examples. Example of a social bottom line would be Flood Tide Company is one of my clients, and they're 1% for the Planet members, and they also allow paid time off for their employees to volunteer for their local nonprofit, which is Charleston Waterkeeper. So that's benefiting society in a positive way. Example of environmental bottom line would be RepYourWater, who's also a client of mine, and they've gone zero waste to landfill at their headquarters, so they divert over 95% of their waste from the landfill, and have also offset 100% of their greenhouse gas emissions from their purchased electricity from their headquarters. So the next question is, well, how does that translate into affecting your economic bottom line? And the way that it does translate is in the form of cost reductions, in the form of increased sales, and also in the form of customer loyalty, which is a major KPI as we're starting to see some trends towards that, and I'll talk a little bit about that. So overall trends that we're seeing, climate change, our oceans are warming, and they're becoming more acidic. This is bad for all marine species. On the freshwater front, we're seeing less snowpack and warmer stream temperatures, which is putting stress on all cold water species. But we're also seeing a trend and a growing number of conscious consumers. So they want to buy and support brands that align with their values. And we're also starting to see the very beginning of, I think it's going to be a carbon neutrality movement. As we know that climate change is affecting our fisheries. Right now there's over 42 brands in the outdoor industry that have made a commitment to going carbon neutral. So those are some just overall trends that we're starting to see and sort of frame the context of this conversation. So I will introduce our panelists. I've got Dr. Andy Danylchuk, who's the professor of fish conservation at UMass Amherst. I've got Corinne Doctor, the co-owner of RepYourWater, Steve Hemkens, VP of Fly Fishing at Orvis, and Oliver White, owner of Abaco and Bair's Lodge. So appreciate y'all being here today. All right, so first off, I thought I would just ask the audience real quick by show of hands, are you concerned about the impact that climate change is is having on our fisheries. All right, so everyone in the room. So that's what. God, why didn't I like this everywhere? So I thought I would also start the conversation off and with a little bit of science and ask Andy from a scientific perspective. How is climate change impacting our fisheries?
Yep, thanks, Rick. So, I mean, the evidence that climate change is real is unequivocal, right? That if you look at global air temperatures, they've increased by 1 degree since the 80s. If we look at carbon emissions, they continue to rise past a baseline that has been level for millennia until like the Industrial Revolution. And so things are warming at a very fast rate, not only air temperature, but water temperatures. And also tied with climate change, it's not just about warming, it's about extremes. It's about extreme droughts, it's about extreme flood events, it's about bigger hurricanes, bigger storms, and also about sea level rise. So it's all these things mixed together. It's not just, and I think we get trapped sometimes because I think outside of this room and a lot of things that we teach our kids, it's like global warming, it's warming, it's warming. It's not just warming. Yes, it's warming, but there are other things that are happening. From a fish's perspective, 99.9% of the fish are ectotherms. They're a product of their environment and temperature. Fish need water to live in, and their metabolism is tied to water temperatures. So as water temperature increases, the metabolic costs increase, and thinking about what we do as anglers, we also try to catch them and they do get stressed out. So water temperature plays a big role in terms of thinking about how fish are responding to climate change. Thinking about the extreme events that we're trying to kind of combat and deal with in terms of things that are happening on the landscape or the seascape, that it's a very daunting issue, but it's one that we can chip away at in terms of individual behaviors, whether it's about how we practice catch and release, or how we make decisions about how we vote, or how we kick plastic, and how we modify our behaviors. So from a science perspective, it's there. Like, we know climate change is happening. I know they're the climate change deniers. They're the ones that also think that the Earth is flat. And and I think that because of the evidence being there, that I think we as an industry have to take an evidence-based approach and think about how we can work within our little nodes and as individuals, as parts of networks in terms of our fishery, and as part of a broader community that includes the industry. And because recreational anglers look towards the industry for social norms, that I think that's why it's important that companies get on board. So I know that's a little bit beyond the science, but we have to embrace the science in order to positively affect change, and have that common language and that common voice behind the movement that climate change is real and that there are some things that we can do right now, and also how that can have a cascading effect on the future. So.
All right, and so just as something you mentioned about the science that is interesting, do you have any thoughts on how we can advance the topic of science behind climate change? Because it seems to be that even though it's abundantly clear with the science, we still have people who are willing to say that they're not believing it.
Yeah, so an approach I often take if I'm presenting in an audience where there are a lot of climate change deniers, I'm like, so do you acknowledge that things are warming? Yes. Do you acknowledge that things are getting more severe? Yeah, things are getting more severe. Do you acknowledge that, well, like even if it's not, in your mind, not human generated, there's still these things that are changing that we have to adapt to. Because we all have to be able to get and sit in the room to have the conversation as opposed to being polarized, right? And I think that what I see from, in terms of the scientific evidence, sure, there are, climactic cycles that happened over, millennia, but not an uptake like we've seen in terms of temperature, not an uptake that we've seen in, sea level rise, and carbon emissions. I think that evidence is there. And so, yes, there are deniers, but it's also about the critical mass, right? And I think we need to form that critical mass.
Awesome. All right, so switching over to Oliver, you've guided all over the world. You have recently experienced a severe hurricane on Abaco. But I guess my question is, aside from Abaco, I mean, are you seeing, or have you witnessed firsthand experience of climate change effects on fisheries?
Yeah, of course, right? I mean, always, just like Andy said, it's all the extremes, man. It's the low water, it's the high water, it's the abnormal temperatures, early season, late season, the extremes in the summer. I mean, it's the hoot owl closures all through Montana every summer. Yeah, almost everywhere you go, you're watching an impact. I mean, it's unavoidable at this stage.
Yeah, and so we're starting to see that everywhere too. I mean, we see it in Charleston, especially the sea level rise. I think we're at like 58 days this year it flooded in Charleston, which is pretty significant increase compared to historic lows. So I think everyone's starting to see that. But from a business perspective, I wanted to ask Steve, what are some of the biggest risks that you see that businesses face by not acting on climate?
Well, obviously, if the fish can't live, the overall long-term viability of our sport, and we can adapt and go fish for other things, but I mean, we've really built this industry around certain species that we all like to chase and that we're projecting to our customers, and so I don't think it's overly dramatic to say that the trajectory that we're on is going to be really challenging for many of us that work in the business of providing tackle, providing experiences from an outfitting perspective, as it becomes more difficult for species to adapt if their kind of ranges get reduced, and that is going to have an impact, because at the end of the day, kind of the tug is the drug, and there are a lot of other ways that people can go have an experience outside, and the fish are a really critical part of the whole experience.
Yeah, and you mentioned some of the challenges, and are y'all seeing? I guess Corinne, I'll ask you. Are y'all facing challenges in communicating climate change with your customers, and would you say that your customers care?
I would say, because of the way we've positioned ourselves of being very conservation and sustainable focused, if one of our customers has pushback, they shouldn't be our customer. And I'm very comfortable saying, if we're not on the same page with this, then we shouldn't be in business together. And that even goes for a direct customer. So we use our marketing platforms not just to communicate, we want you to buy our products, but also these are our conservation partners. These are initiatives that we believe in. In working with Rick, he helps us put together an annual sustainability report where we line up all of the things that we've done and then the data to back up why that's a good decision. And we send that out to every single one of our customers via email. And people read it and they write back and they say, I kind of knew you guys cared about conservation and all of that, but I had no idea how much. And it's an incredibly positive thing for us. So we don't see that negative side at all, because people know that that's who we are.
Right. And so that's one of the things that, as I mentioned earlier, is we start to see that trend. I mean, this is just a firsthand account example of it. It's not just, you can read a lot of reports, there's a lot of CSR reports out there that say, hey, the overall trend is that, consumers care, but to actually have a firsthand account, you actually see that, and in terms of, what we track is, I think, pretty evident.
I was traveling, I think people last year in Colorado had a tough year with fires. People in Montana have been having a tough year. Folks don't want to go fly fishing in a you know, when there's smoke around. And it is, I think, they associate a fire. They may not know that over on the other side of the divide or whatever else that everything's fine. See, there's fires in Colorado, there's fires in Montana. They may go somewhere else, or they just choose not to go fishing. And obviously some of these more extreme events that we're having are even more challenging in terms of folks' ability, either literally or emotionally, to kind of see themselves going out and being outside. And so as those extreme events, whether it's fire, it's low water, closures, the river's closed, you can't go fishing, there was a hurricane, those are all bad for business.
Yep. And in terms of, you know, so we're here talking about businesses fighting climate change, right? So, Andy, I wanted to ask you also, you know, what do you see as some of the biggest obstacles that we face as an industry and as businesses in solving climate change?
Yeah, I think part of it is describing to consumers things that they can actually do. I mean, climate change, if you think like, we gotta stop climate change, we're like, oh my God, like it's a giant bus and how am I gonna step in front of the bus, right? And I think as individuals, as the industry, you know, to think about small little tangible things that people can do in terms of how they vote, how they use their dollars, how they make decisions, is important. And, you know, and we see this in terms of like, you know, compact fluorescents or LEDs or whatever in people's homes. They're already understanding that they can make sustainable decisions that affect their bottom line at home. So the same thing has to happen, I think, in terms of the fishing industry and other industries too, and like providing ways that people can be sort of these catalysts for change in terms of their personal responsibilities of what they do on a daily basis, and also then how they make decisions about, you know, who they buy from or who they vote for, and not make it sound as if it's something that's so daunting that you end up breeding the sense of apathy. You know, climate change is so big. Well, what am I going to do? What's my role in this? I can't stop climate change. It's you know, it all depends on, you know, government regulations or other things that you gotta. There's part of that sort of like that introspectiveness, like living that examined life. It's tough, right? My example is like when my in-laws come and visit, like I end up going and fishing cardboard out of the garbage bag, right? Because they recycle at home and they know where their recycling bin is home, but they don't know where their recycling bin is in my house. So I go and I open the garbage and I'm like, okay, well that has to go in the recycling. And I don't call them out on it, I just go and do it. I clean up the mess, right? And I help take up that personal responsibility. And I think part of it's putting the, you know, putting the weight back on the industry a little bit as setting a really good example, but providing these tangible ways that anglers, people that the consumers can make a difference and make it apparent, and also even be able to calculate, you know, how much of a change in their behavior is going to mean, you know, a positive effect towards fighting climate change or making sure that, you know, it turns back to ultimately preserve their experience when they're on the river or on the flats.
All right, thanks for that. And
Can I piggyback on that?
yeah, please do.
I love hearing that from you too, because that's one thing that I preach to all my friends that have nothing to do with a really outdoorsy lifestyle is think about what change you can make. And sometimes I need to tell them one thing they can do, but it's little things. It's don't use Ziploc bags, get reusable ones. And it seems so simple to those of us who interact with that every day. But having really tangible, this is the one little piece you can do. And sometimes it's dumpster diving. I do a lot of that myself. But my father-in-law lives with me, so I do lecture him. And,
I still lecture my in-laws.
oh, yeah, about his trash habits. But it's having those really tangible things, and you have to just look at your situation of what you can do. We lease our facility, so we can't put solar panels like our friends at Anglers All did here in Denver. But we can go carbon neutral by purchasing renewable energy certificates. And so you just kind of have to look at what it is that you can do, check it off the list, pass it on, make sure everybody else is doing it, because you need something that you feel like you're making a difference, and it will.
And I think we've lost that whole sentiment that one person can make a difference. Well, one person can make a difference if lots of other people are also having that mentality, right? And then all of a sudden you've got that critical mass for change. And I think that, it comes up when we have these big daunting issues like climate change, right? It's huge. And it seems like it's that big elephant in the room that we're never going to move. But we can't, we lose the fight if all of a sudden we don't provide people with enough resources that it breeds that sense of apathy, right? And I get this from my students. I teach 140 students every fall in fish conservation. And the way I have the course structured, it's like the first module is all about fish plus water, like how did that all work? And the second module is adding humans, and it's super depressing. It's about commercial fishing and recreational fishing and pollution and invasive species and all that stuff. And after that module, all the students are like, how can you still do this? This sucks, I'm so depressed. Like, humans are really nasty on the planet and we're screwing things up. And then the third module is all about solutions for sustainability. It's like, here's how we can make incremental changes. Here are case studies, here's our examples. And by the end, they realize that, even if they walk away from the course and they never do anything with fish conservation ever again, they realize that how they make a single decision about who they vote for or what they buy or how they interface with nature, that's going to be a positive, right?
Well, I think an interesting part of what you're talking about is sharing success stories and not, getting too down on yourself about, hey, we can't do anything about this. And I love the story of Oliver when y'all kicked plastic at your lodge, and that's a great story, but it also had a pretty significant impact on your economic bottom line too, and we're still doing the right thing environmentally. I was wondering if you could elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah, of course. So Rick came and did a sustainability analysis for our business, and we had lots of goals, but one of the easiest things was to kick plastic. We already had a reverse osmosis UV water purification system, but kind of Americans are ingrained when you're traveling, you should always drink bottled water. And so we had a hard time getting people away from that. And we went totally plastic free. We put in like water bottle stations. We invested money in like Yeti bottles and high quality stuff so people felt more comfortable with it to help get the buy-in. But between the two lodges on a given year, we used roughly 100,000 plastic bottles a year, at a cost of 17 cents each. So that's 17 grand that we would spend every year on bottled water that we no longer had to spend, and can reinvest that money back into good products. And then the excess of that we moved forward to other sustainability initiatives to kind of keep moving the company forward to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, but also become more profitable.
Yeah, and on that, I know that y'all had done some of this, y'all had done like a lighting upgrade and things of that nature that help to reduce your energy demand. That's one of the easiest things that every business can do, right? They can, and it's easy. It's a lighting retrofit. It's switching from a CFL or to LED, and that's automatically going to reduce your greenhouse gas emissions, but ultimately save you money.
Yeah, we changed all our bulbs, and we also put everything on timers, so you don't have to remember to turn things on and off. And so the pool would come on and off by itself, all the outdoor lights would come on and off by themselves. The whole combination of little steps all adds up.
Yep, and so on the same note, in terms of what steps are you taking, Steve? I know Orvis has taken some steps, especially as it relates to energy usage and things of that nature. I was wondering what are how y'all have made the business case, I guess, for fighting climate change, but also for sustainability.
Well, in terms of the electricity consumption and conversion to LEDs, and it's kind of like a no-brainer. We save a lot. We saved a lot of money. We reduced our consumption in the past 10 years about 54%. In our warehouse, we're a big company. We have a big footprint in terms of our energy consumption, and we said we were going to do this. I had kind of forgotten about the effort until getting ready for this, and we made real and it wasn't something that was cascaded down from on high. We set some goals about that and people took some ownership in it. It always helps in a business when there's a quick payback that sustains long term, and so that's a big one. And it's not just inside. We recently put LED lights in the parking lots of our flagship store, of the rod shop, of our headquarters. We have some solar panels on our roof. It only accounts for about 10% of our consumption for that building, but all that adds up in terms of hundreds of thousands of kilowatt hours per year that are saved in terms of consumption, and then that translates to money that we would have spent otherwise that we can do towards other things. And so to build on what Oliver said, I think you need to set some goals and then work towards those goals, measure against them. Not necessarily identifying easy wins, but things that people can wrap their head around, because success engenders buy-in engenders momentum and pride of ownership. And Kick Plastic is an area where we had a lot of success. We worked with Costa to launch Kick Plastic within the outfitting community at our guide rendezvous a couple years ago. The event went plastic free. The next year, we had Leah from Kick Plastic come and talk to the outfitters. And last week I was in Montana with pro outfitters bird hunting, and the entire lodge is plastic free. The guides all have reusable water bottles, and that happened it's all happened over the past couple of years, and there are a lot of other examples of that. We've brought that home to our corporate office. If you were a guest of Orvis, come in, you get a reusable cup for the day, and then that reinforces to the associates at Orvis, and you bring that home when you're talking to your kids. And so I think that is an example of two things that you can do is focus on your lighting and think about kind of the stuff that you're consuming is things to kind of start on that journey.
Yeah, and I agree, and I think it's grabbing that low-hanging fruit in terms of, hey, what can we do right now? And that's something that I always recommend with any clients is you want to start with what you can control first, right? Because if I was to tell you right now, I want, hey, everyone, you're going to dive deep into your supply chain tomorrow, you would be completely freaked out. And you wouldn't do any sustainability initiatives because it's complex and it's complicated. But I think part of what everyone here is demonstrating is that you start with what you can control first and make an impact, and whether that's kicking plastic, eliminating waste, LED, things of that nature. That's really critically important.
What's your 97%?
97 diverted from landfill.
97% of waste diverted from landfill. And the way that translates into fighting climate change and using your business as implementing a sustainable business model is that instead of them having to haul that to a landfill and the emissions associated with actually hauling that much waste, because there's weight to it, right? They're refusing it at the beginning, they're composting, they're recycling. So the kick plastic component and the waste component is really very much wrapped up into the climate change.
And I was pretty proud of Orvis that we had gotten 86% in terms of our waste stream, and through reducing paper consumption, upcycling pallets. Again, we've got a big scale e-waste, batteries, like all the scanners in the warehouse have batteries, and making sure that those get recycled, scrap metal from the strapping on pallets and all the different things, baling plastic. There are 3 tons of pant trimmings from hemming that we kind of donate that get upcycled or repurposed. And so those are some things that we've done. We're in Vermont, so it's easy to compost. We don't have to, but we do. And so that ends up diverting a couple tons of food scraps and food waste and paper towels that would otherwise go into a landfill. They'd off-gas methane. So those are, I think, some of the things that you can start to lean into. And it's not as easy in some places as it is in others, but you can, start on that journey.
Well, I think, Oliver can probably speak to this better than I can, but, that was one of the interesting things that I just had no idea. Like these islands in the Bahamas, they don't have anywhere to recycle any of that stuff. That waste has nowhere to go, which is pretty wild. And so I did want to just shift gears a little bit on that.
So yes, Rick dug through all our trash, which is part of what he does when it comes to your business. And 35% of all of our trash was beer bottles. And glass is like the easiest thing in the world to recycle, except in the Bahamas where it just doesn't happen. And it took me about 18 months, but I got, there's 2 breweries in the Bahamas, and I got one of them to agree to send a container to Abaco, and they were going to let me fill the container with my empty bottles for the whole year, and then ship it back in the exchange for me doing all of my business for that with them, and like not buying the other beer. And so we had all that set up pre-hurricane, but like just a simple conversation like that with a brewery locally who is willing to make the initiative, cuts our trash emission by 35%, with really simple things of, just a conversation with your local business partners of what you can do.
And I think that kind of brings up what I think is an interesting point in terms of what are some of the common misconceptions that people have about sustainability. There's this automatic thing when you talk about sustainability and people are like, oh, it's going to cost more. That's just an added cost and it's not worthwhile. And we're demonstrating here that you're cutting costs, you're reducing energy usage, you're fighting climate change, you're reducing waste, and those are all stories that are very marketable to consumers. When you tell that story, it resonates with them and they want to stay more loyal to your brand. And we've certainly seen that with RepYourWater too.
Yeah. I also think it even goes down to like thinking about that the land and the water is all connected, right? Water flows downhill. And so thinking about what even happens on the land in terms of food production, where you're sourcing your food, if you've got a cafeteria in your factory or whatever, where you're sourcing that food coming, where, can you grow some of it even seasonally? Can you use drip irrigation and capture rainwater? I mean, that was one thing. I lived in the Bahamas for 10 years and, it took a long time for us to shift away. We built buildings and we built cisterns underneath, so we captured rainwater, but we went into the communities and people were drifting away from using cisterns and going to the town water because it was a status symbol. It was like, well, we don't need cisterns anymore because now we can tap into the RO plant. Well, whereas actually the opposite's better, right? If you can capture that cistern and save some of your own water, then you can use that for irrigation. And I think that goes into like reminding people where there is that interconnection between what goes on in the water, what goes on land, and even some of the basic decisions of where we get our food from and how that ties into things that happen. These companies have big footprints. And thinking about the subtle things that we can demonstrate that other people can kind of pick up on. So,
yeah. So Corinne, I wanted to, if you could elaborate a little bit on how RepYourWater is really, because this is about making the business case for sustainability, right? And if you could elaborate on that, that would be, I think, beneficial.
Yeah, we have data that we can tap into in our online store. You can run a report, say who's a returning customer, who is new, who's like how long have they been here, all of that. And we've seen an increase of 55% of our customer loyalty. We've always had a lot of return customers, but once we started marketing and making sure people knew what we stood for and these actionable steps that we say we're doing, and we're very transparent, like this is exactly what we're doing. Once we started marketing it, we saw a 55% increase in our customer loyalty on just direct customers, and then just through anecdotal evidence and conversations with my retailers, it matters to them as well. And it's kind of like, I of course can't think of the word right now, but it's like that chain effect where they see what we're doing and they want to do better. So I've had conversations with multiple retailers that say, okay, I see that you said you do this. Now I want to do that. And it's sort of that just keeps spreading the word. And it's good for us because if they like what I'm doing, they obviously still want to sell my products. And then also for our direct customers, there's not a single, even like you could call it a negative interaction when maybe we shipped the wrong thing to a customer and they're almost apologizing and they're like, well, I just love you and I love everything that you stand for, but I really wanted the brook trout hat, not the brown trout hat. And I'm like, yeah, you should get what you ordered. Like even those type of interactions include that anecdotal, almost like a thank you for doing what we are doing.
Well, and I think that's part of the, it's like this in sustainable business, it's, you call that doing well by doing good and having that positive effect. And Steve, what would you say are, in terms of what Orvis is doing or some positive success stories that have really have come out of some of your sustainability initiatives?
I would say in terms of like we're relatively early on in our sustainability journey. I think the fact that we're continuing to own kind of our footprint,
Yep.
and that we've made real progress and are making progress from an energy efficiency and waste stream perspective.
Yep.
Like I'm really excited about this next chapter for Orvis, where we're focused more on our supply chain and really owning the inputs and the outputs and the energy intensivity of raw material production, whether it's grown or it's extracted, thinking about chemistry, all the different things that go into the point where a good is delivered in our warehouse and walking the talk more there. Proud of the use of recycled materials, the insulation package and in our new high-end insulation has that story. It's not an end in itself.
Sure.
The production of the original material used resources, but it's at least prolonged. Instead of being linear from kind of coming out of the ground and going back in the ground, it at least has some circularity and a longer life.
Yeah, and I think that's probably the biggest takeaway that in working with clients is to understand that this is not a flip the switch deal. This is not like, hey, well, we signed up and we're going to be sustainable and we're going to do that, and at the end of the year we're going to have no impact. It's just that's not possible. It is absolutely a journey, and you start with grabbing the low-hanging fruits, and then you start incorporating things like recycled materials, start looking into your supply chain and your products. And the way that really affects climate change is you're not using virgin materials because there's embodied energy and there's embodied water and products. So when you use something that's recycled, that embodied energy hasn't gone to waste. You're not starting from something virgin. And so those are all positive steps from
packaging.
Packaging as well. Yeah, that's a big one.
In prepping for this, 42% of all logging goes into packaging, which ultimately ends up in a landfill. I mean, there's a lot of different things. And we're starting to hear from our associates. We have our own retail stores. We solicit feedback, anonymous feedback, and we're hearing, a discomfort or looking for us to think about how the goods are delivered to them, because they're taking all these shirts and stuff out of plastic bags, and then they go into a dump. They go into a trash bag, and then they go into a dumpster, and they aren't bailing that. They may not have municipal recycling for those sorts of things, and so those are some of the areas I think that we're focused on and seeking either materials that we're using in our products that have some certification, blue sign, they're recycled, so that we at least know, even if the product itself and not every piece of the supply chain is perfectly buttoned up, knowing that from a chemistry, production, kind of integrity perspective, the stuff that is going into the product is, has some baseline level of integrity.
Yep.
think the other thing is we're working towards establishing our what our carbon footprint is, and then using that to set some goals and start to act against that.
Yeah, and that's the thing. And when you're talking about setting carbon goals, like if you were to go carbon neutral, it's all about, if here's our goal, and this is no pun intended, this is what it's called, it's called backcasting, because then you're, okay, well, what steps do we need to take to achieve that end goal of going carbon neutral? And so all of these things add up, whether it's kicking plastic, whether it's reducing energy consumption, recycling, doing a vegetable garden, composting, all of these steps actually add up and make an impact. But I think for me, the takeaway, because I do want to be cognizant of everyone's time because it's happy hour and I'm sure everyone's like, could we wrap this up and ready for a beer? But I think that the takeaway for me anyway, and from what I'm hearing from what y'all have done, which I commend all of y'all for doing, is that it's not only the right thing to do, but there is a legitimate business case in the terms of cost savings, in the terms of customer loyalty, in the terms of mitigating risk. If you're a business in this industry, you have to mitigate the risk of your impact on climate change, but also using it to drive innovation, attracting and retaining talent at your companies. And those are the things that sustainable business models demonstrate time and time again, and I think you'll continue to see that. So I would like to thank everyone for your time today, for showing, hopefully demonstrating that sustainable business works. And yeah, I'd like to just take a little time in case anyone has any questions in the audience.
Chris, what are you doing? Can
Like-
you repeat the question?
He wants to know what we're doing
Yeah,
packaging
just in general
wise.
as far as
Yeah, so one thing is, because I crabbed enough, our main brim tap factory has switched all of their poly bags to recycled content. And one of the big problems, especially because we are a little guy, we don't have the Orvis footprint, is I have to just beg and beg and beg and beg and beg, and they're like, yeah, the minimums on that is 200,000 bags. And I'm like, well, I can't do that. But if the whole factory switches everything over, boom, like done. And that's a lot of other companies that are impacted on that. Rick and I have this conversation about poly bags all the time, where it's a necessary evil right now. We haven't found a different solution, because if you do not protect the product, then you're wasting all the materials that went into that product. Like, I can't put a shirt in my dusty warehouse and expect someone to want it after sitting in dust forever, So that's one thing. And then we also use all recycled void fill. So even we make glassware, and we use it's called green wrap or eco wrap. It's a recycled paper product that's supposed to mimic bubble wrap. So, like, I will find it in a recycled material, or I will make someone make it for me.
But there are options available, and you're starting to see increasing numbers of options. Especially packaging's a big one, and whoever solves the poly bag problem is going to make a boatload of money.
Can I give a shout out to another company that's not even here? Eco Products are not Eco Products is great, but Eco Enclose is a packaging. It's a sustainable packaging company, and they're based here in Colorado. So we get all of our shipping, packaging from them, and void fill and all of that stuff.
Cool. Eco Enclosed, so there's a solution if you're looking for packaging.
Tell them Corinne sent you. No, I'm just kidding.
All right, anything else? Well, thank you for your time today. Really appreciate y'all carving out some time out of your day to talk about sustainable business. If you have any questions or would like to discuss how we can implement some sustainable solutions at your company, I'm happy to have that conversation with you. Thank you.